Hi everyone, Chris here. As most of our regulars know, from this coming Sunday we'll be starting a new teaching series in the Old Testament book of Esther. And maybe Esther's a book that you haven't read for a long time, or maybe you've never read it. And so we thought it might be an idea just to provide a bit of an introduction and an overview about where it fits in the Bible storyline, and in particular how it speaks into our lives today. Esther is one of the historical books set after Israel's exile by the kingdom of Babylon. It's actually set during the Persian Empire, who succeeded the Babylonian Empire. In particular, during the reign of King Xerxes, also known as King Ahasuerus. So this is mid to late 5th century BC. And so all of the action in Esther unfolds not in Israel or in Jerusalem, where many Jews from the original exile have begun to return, but actually in Susa, the capital of the kingdom of Persia. And as a narrative, Esther has the lot. It's got court intrigue and devious plots and suspenseful moments. It has tears and sorrow. It's got joy and celebration. And it also has a lineup of very colourful characters. There's the self-glorying and hedonistic King Xerxes. His queen at the beginning of the book, the proud Queen Vashti. There's the malicious Haman, as well as the respected Jewish servant Mordecai. And obviously at the center of it all, the main character is Esther herself, after whom the book is named, the orphan Jewish girl who grows up to become queen of Persia and ultimately be able to bring deliverance to her people. We don't know, humanly speaking, who composed Esther as we currently have it, but there are several clues throughout the book. There are references throughout Esther to written documents, like official Persian court documents. There's also a very strong familiarity with Persian law and customs. But throughout the book, there's also a very strong Jewish nationalistic streak, a great pride in being Jewish. And as well, the great end of the book is the establishment of the Jewish festival of Purim. And so this leads us to believe that the most likely human author of the book of Esther was a Persian Jew, possibly a court recorder from the administrative center of Susa. And the purpose behind Esther's composition appears to be recording the historical establishment of the Jewish festival of Purim. So particularly the deliverance, the great deliverance that happened for the Jewish people in exile under Xerxes' reign and all the events leading up to it, as well as the official beginning of that festival and the obligation that goes out to all the Jews throughout the land and throughout all countries to recognize Purim and to celebrate what God has done for them in that moment. And so themes that are central to the book of Esther are actually themes about God's control. Now, if you know anything about Esther, one of the bits of trivia you may know is that it's the only book of the Bible that actually doesn't mention God at all. And as Christian believers, that kind of strikes us as a bit odd. It may make you think, well, what relevance can this have to my life as a book of the Bible? But actually, it has great relevance for our lives because God's activity, his presence and his activity is assumed at every point. And that is an assumption that is made all the stronger by the fact that there is no explicit mention of him. And so, while it may lack the miraculous interventions of Yahweh that we find in other historical books such as Joshua and Samuel and Kings, there is the discernible activity of God throughout the whole book of Esther in human decisions, in apparent coincidences, all of these things which work towards God's purposes being achieved. In this case, the protection and deliverance of his people, in spite of great opposition and often great hostility. And the great truth of Esther is that the same is true for God's people today. You know, we may not always see the ways in which God is at work. It can make us question, is God even present and active in our world, in our lives? But what Esther reminds us is that God is present and active, always. And we see that most powerfully, most profoundly in the cross of Jesus, that great meeting point of judgment and deliverance, where God's sovereign activity through the bad choices, the evil choices of human beings, actually led to sin being judged and humans having an opportunity to be forgiven and have eternity with God. And so that's one of the great encouragements that Esther points us forward to. And so our hope is that you enjoy the story of Esther over the coming months, but more than just enjoy it, our hope is that you are encouraged that whatever is going on in your life, whatever situation you find yourself in, and with the current COVID-19 crisis and the upheaval and the anxiety that it has wrought throughout the world, it is great to know that God continues to be at work in such a time as this, at work for the good of his people, for those he has loved, he continues to love, and for whose good he is working towards. And so we hope that you're encouraged by that as you study Esther with us this coming term.